The city streets were quiet that evening, but the calm was deceptive. A seasoned cop drove his patrol car slowly through a part of town that had earned a reputation for trouble. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalks. The cop's eyes scanned every corner, every alley, every doorway. He had walked these streets for years and knew that danger often came quietly. As he turned a corner, he noticed a figure standing near a dimly lit warehouse. Something about the man's posture caught his attention. He wasn't slouching like someone hiding from trouble, nor was he fidgeting like a street thief. He was calm, almost too calm. The cop slowed down and rolled down his window, keeping his hand close to his radio. "Evening," the cop called out, his voice steady but firm. "What are you doing here?" The man looked at him, eyes sharp and steady. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. "Just waiting for a friend," he said, his tone polite. But there was something in it that made the cop uneasy. The cop stepped out of his car, his boots crunching on the gravel. He had a gut feeling that this man wasn't ordinary. "In this neighborhood, it's not safe to just wait around. Mind if I ask for some ID?" The man reached into his coat slowly, not in a threatening way, but in a controlled, deliberate manner. When he pulled out a badge, it wasn't the usual city police badge. The cop's brow furrowed. "FBI?" he asked, his voice laced with surprise and suspicion. The man nodded slightly. "I'm here on business, but I can answer a few questions if you have them." The cop's mind raced. He had dealt with federal agents before, but rarely in such direct, unplanned encounters. He decided to probe, to see if the man was really who he claimed to be. "Business? What kind of business brings an FBI agent to this part of town at this hour?" The agent's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Let's just say it involves people who don't always play by the rules. Sometimes I need to observe. Sometimes I need to act." The cop studied him, trying to read any sign of deceit. He noticed the agent's calm demeanor, the confidence in his voice, and the way he stood unshaken. There was an unusual intensity in his eyes, one that suggested he had seen and handled situations far beyond the usual street crime. Feeling a mix of caution and curiosity, the cop took a step closer. "I've been patrolling these streets for years. I know trouble when I see it. You're telling me you're here for some federal case, but you're standing alone in a place that's usually crawling with criminals. Doesn't that put you at risk?" The agent nodded slowly. "I understand the risk, but I'm trained for it. Sometimes blending in is better than making a scene. It's not always about confrontation. Observation can be just as powerful." The cop felt a pang of respect, but his pride wouldn't let him show it openly. "Observation is fine, but it's not the same as action. If something goes wrong here, you could be in real danger. Do you even know the streets like we do?" The agent's eyes met his squarely. "I've studied these streets, the people, and the patterns. I know enough to stay safe. But I'm not here to challenge local authority. I'm here to do my job efficiently." The cop's hand rested lightly on his belt, but his mind was spinning. He had dealt with criminals who tried to talk their way out, but this wasn't the same. The agent's knowledge, confidence, and composure were disarming. He couldn't place the man's experience, but he could feel it. He had met someone exceptional. "All right," the cop said cautiously, trying to regain control of the conversation. "You say you're FBI, can you prove it?" The agent handed over his credentials, but instead of shoving them forward, he held them out in a measured, confident manner. The cop examined them closely, noticing the official seal and the detailed information. It looked genuine, but the cop still had questions. Real agents didn't usually wander into the city streets without coordination. "Why now? Why here?" The agent seemed to sense his hesitation. "I don't expect you to take my word blindly. You're right to question it. Sometimes trust is earned by action, not words." The cop's eyes narrowed. "Action, huh? So what kind of action have you taken in this area? You can't just tell me you're FBI and expect me to step aside." The agent's expression remained calm. "I've observed patterns, followed leads, and sometimes intervened when necessary. You don't need to know all the details, but I assure you, I'm not here to undermine your work." The cop felt a mix of skepticism and intrigue. He had encountered overconfident criminals before, but this man wasn't behaving like one. There was no arrogance, only a quiet authority that demanded respect. It was unnerving, yet strangely compelling. Suddenly, the sound of distant sirens cut through the night. The cop's senses sharpened. He gestured toward the warehouse. "Tell me, what are you watching for?" "Any specific people?" The agent's gaze flicked toward the building, then back to the cop. I can't reveal everything, but I can say this. Some people in this area are planning activities that could get them and others in serious trouble. My role is to prevent that quietly before it escalates. The cop considered this. He had encountered small-time criminals, gang disputes, and drug deals. But the agent's tone suggested something larger, more organized. He realized that the man was not exaggerating or playing games. There was real weight behind his words. Feeling a growing sense of curiosity, the cop leaned against his car. You know, I've been on these streets for a long time. I've seen all kinds of trouble. You're telling me you can handle yourself here without backup? That's a bold claim. The agent smiled faintly. Experience teaches you a lot, and preparation is everything. I respect local knowledge, and I rely on it when necessary. I'm not here to show off, only to do what needs to be done efficiently. The cop's tension eased slightly, but he remained alert. All right, I'll take your word for now. But if anything goes wrong, you'll answer to me. Understand? The agent nodded, a subtle acknowledgement of the cop's authority. I understand. I'm not here to cause conflict. I'm here to prevent it wherever possible. A brief silence settled over the street. The cop watched the agent carefully, noting every movement, every subtle gesture. He had learned over the years that danger often wore a calm face, and instinct told him that this man was not just calm, but capable. Finally, the cop straightened. You're walking a fine line here. Just remember, these streets are mine to patrol. Don't underestimate them. The agent gave a small nod, a gesture of respect. I wouldn't dream of it. I know these streets have their own rules. I just operate within them differently. The cop took a step back, reassessing the situation. He realized he had just met someone extraordinary, someone whose presence challenged his assumptions about authority, knowledge, and experience. He felt a mixture of unease and admiration. As the night deepened, the cop returned to his car, keeping a careful eye on the agent. He started his engine, the hum of the patrol car filling the quiet street. Something had shifted in him. He understood now that not all law enforcement was as straightforward as he thought. Some operations required patience, observation, and a different kind of skill. The agent stayed near the warehouse, blending into the shadows, watching, waiting, analyzing. The cop drove slowly down the street, pondering the encounter. He realized that he had been schooled in a way not through force or argument, but through calm authority, intelligence, and an unshakable presence. By the time the cop reached the next intersection, he was already thinking about the lessons he had just learned. He knew that the night was far from over, that the city held many more surprises, and that encounters like this could change how he saw his own role in keeping the streets safe. The agent had left a mark on him, subtle but powerful, a reminder that respect and skill often spoke louder than words or badges. The night went on, but the memory of that encounter lingered, shaping the cop's thoughts and sharpening his awareness. He knew that tomorrow and every night after, his perspective on authority, danger, and collaboration would never be quite the same. The night air was heavy, carrying the faint smell of rain that had fallen earlier. The streets were empty now, quiet except for the occasional hum of a distant engine. The cop parked his patrol car a few blocks away from the warehouse, trying to clear his thoughts. The encounter with the FBI agent lingered in his mind, each detail replaying over and over. There was something about the man's presence that unsettled him, yet also demanded respect. Curiosity gnawed at him. He had been on the force for years, seen every type of criminal imaginable, but this encounter was different. He knew he couldn't just ignore it. His instincts told him to approach, to engage, to understand. The cop started walking back toward the warehouse, flashlight in hand, though he didn't fully need it. His eyes were sharp, scanning shadows and doorways as he approached. As he got closer, he saw the agent standing in the same spot, calm and composed, almost like he was part of the shadows themselves. The cop took a deep breath. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. "I need to understand why you're here and what you're really doing." The agent turned slowly, his expression neutral. "I expected you might want answers." "That's understandable. You have a job to do and I respect that. But you should also know, not all information can be shared openly. There are risks if it's exposed." The cop's brow furrowed. He wasn't used to being outmaneuvered in a conversation. "I get that. But I need enough information to know you're not a threat. I can handle criminals, but I can't handle someone I don't understand." The agent nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough. Let's do this step by step. Ask me what you need and I'll answer where I can. The cop leaned against a rusted railing, his posture casual but his mind alert. First, why this area? You said there's activity here, but that's vague. What exactly are you watching for? The agent's eyes flicked to the warehouse, then back to the cop. There are patterns here that suggest illegal activities, organized ones. Small-time crimes aren't my concern tonight. I focus on networks, connections, the kind that can escalate quickly if left unchecked. The cop considered this, nodding slowly. He had dealt with local gangs and petty thieves, but organized operations of this level were rare in his district. You mean something bigger than usual street crime? The agent's nod was slight but confirming. Exactly. And sometimes the most effective way to stop it is by observing and learning, rather than rushing in. Timing and precision matter more than force. The cop rubbed his chin. He had always relied on instinct and immediate action, but there was wisdom in the agent's words. I can see that, he admitted. But what about backup? You're standing here alone. That seems risky. The agent's eyes met his steadily. Risk is always part of the job. But calculated risk with knowledge and preparation is different from reckless exposure. I know when to intervene and when to wait. Patience is often more effective than confrontation. The cop exhaled slowly, impressed despite himself. He had faced danger countless times, but the calm control the agent displayed was something else entirely. All right, he said cautiously. I'll grant you patience. But I need to see proof that you're not just talk. The agent raised an eyebrow. Proof comes in actions, not words. If you follow my lead tonight, you'll see how I operate. You might even learn something. The cop bristled slightly, feeling a mix of pride and challenge. No one had ever suggested he could learn from anyone else on the street. All right then, show me. What's the first step? The agent gestured toward the warehouse. We watch, quietly. Observe the comings and goings, the behavior of those inside. You'll notice patterns you might have missed before. They moved closer to the building, keeping to the shadows. The cop's flashlight stayed off, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. From this distance, he could see figures moving inside, exchanging briefcases, whispering and gesturing. It was clear there was organization, but the details were subtle. The agent's attention to these details was remarkable. See that? The agent whispered, pointing to a figure who seemed to be coordinating others. Notice the way they signal, how they avoid direct eye contact with strangers. It's all methodical. Watch closely, and you'll begin to anticipate their actions. The cop studied the man, following the agent's guidance. Slowly, he began to understand the patterns, recognizing subtle movements and signs he had overlooked. It was an education in observation, a skill he hadn't fully mastered despite years on the force. After several tense minutes, the agent spoke again. Now imagine intervening too early. You risk tipping them off, losing control of the situation. Sometimes the best move is patience, even when every instinct says to act immediately. The cop nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and awe. His instincts had always been his strongest asset, but here he was learning the value of strategy and foresight. I see what you mean, he said quietly. It's like chess, not checkers. One wrong move and everything collapses. The agent smiled faintly. Exactly. And in law enforcement, understanding the game is as important as strength. Knowledge and timing often outweigh force. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed from inside the warehouse, a crate tipping over. The cop's hand instinctively moved toward his radio, but the agent raised a hand, signaling him to stay calm. Observe first, react second, the agent murmured. The cop took a deep breath, forcing himself to follow the advice. He watched as a man inside the warehouse quickly corrected the fallen crate, signaling to others in a subtle way. The agent nodded toward the action. Do you see how they communicate without words? How one small movement can direct an entire operation? That's the kind of detail that makes or breaks an intervention. The cop's mind raced, taking in every movement, every gesture. He began to appreciate the complexity of the operation and the skill required to navigate it safely. This is different from anything I've faced before, he admitted. The agent's expression was calm, almost reassuring. Most people judge situations by surface appearances. If you focus on the surface, you miss the real patterns. Observe deeply, and you'll find opportunities to act wisely. Minutes turned into an hour as they continued to watch. The cop noticed that his earlier judgment, that he was in control, had been challenged. He was learning, not just about the operation, but about himself, his assumptions, his reliance on instinct, and his need for humility in the face of expertise. Finally, the agent turned to him. "You've done well observing. Most would have rushed in or given up in frustration. Patience is a skill and you've shown it." The cop straightened, a mix of pride and newfound respect swelling inside him. "I didn't think I could learn much tonight, but I see now that I have." "You've taught me something important," the agent nodded. "And there's more to learn. Observation is just the beginning. The next steps involve judgment, collaboration, and timing. You'll see that soon enough." The cop felt a shift inside him. He realized that his encounter with the agent was more than just a chance meeting. It was an education in law enforcement, strategy, and respect. He had met someone who challenged his assumptions and made him see the streets and himself differently. As they finally stepped back from the warehouse, the night seemed quieter, yet charged with potential. The cop knew that their paths would cross again, that the lessons he had begun to learn tonight were only the start. He walked back to his car with a new awareness, a sense of purpose, and a recognition that the city held many challenges that required more than instinct. They required wisdom. The agent melted back into the shadows, watching, patient, confident. The cop watched him go, realizing that he had just witnessed a master at work, someone whose approach and calm authority had reshaped his understanding of law enforcement. And as he drove through the empty streets, he carried with him the first real lessons of the night, lessons that would stay with him long after the encounter ended. The following evening, the city felt different, as if the air carried the memory of the previous night. The cop drove his patrol car with a heightened sense of awareness, replaying the lessons he had learned. Every shadow, every distant noise, every flicker of movement seemed charged with significance. He knew the streets would test him again, and this time he wanted to be ready. He returned to the same warehouse district, where the encounter with the undercover agent had started. The streetlights flickered in their usual rhythm, casting elongated shadows across cracked sidewalks. The cop parked his car a block away, keeping his distance. He wasn't sure what he would find, but he had to see if the agent's presence was a one-time occurrence or part of a larger operation. From the corner of his eye, he saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was the agent. He moved with the same calm precision, surveying the area with practiced eyes. The cop stepped out of his car and called softly, "You're here again. I thought you might have moved on." The agent's gaze met his, calm and unreadable. "I follow the patterns. They often bring me back to the same places. Things here are unfolding and observation is still necessary." The cop nodded, understanding that this was more than just a casual presence. There was purpose, a plan beyond his immediate perception. "I need to know more about your role. Last night I saw your skills, your patience, but I want to understand your approach, your method. How do you handle situations like these without exposing yourself or escalating danger?" The agent gestured for him to follow, and they moved along the alley, keeping to the shadows. "It's about blending in, studying the environment, predicting behavior, and acting decisively when the moment is right. Most people rely on strength or authority alone, but real control comes from understanding every detail, anticipating every move." The cop absorbed this, realizing that his instincts were only part of the equation. He had always acted quickly, often relying on intuition, but observation and foresight could prevent unnecessary risk. "So patience and planning," he said. "You're telling me that rushing in, even with the right intention, can ruin everything." The agent nodded. "Exactly. Timing is everything. Knowing when to intervene and when to wait can determine success or failure. Action without understanding often causes more problems than it solves." They approached the warehouse entrance, careful to avoid the attention of those inside. The cop noticed subtle signs of coordination, hand signals, silent communication, and a rhythm to the activity that only someone trained to observe would notice. He realized the agent had an almost intuitive understanding of these signals, interpreting them quickly and accurately. The cop spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I've walked these streets for years, but I've never noticed so much detail. You're seeing layers I didn't know existed." The agent's eyes flicked to him briefly. "Most people only see the surface. Patterns are hidden until someone knows where to look. Observation teaches patience, insight, and sometimes restraint." Suddenly, a figure emerged from the warehouse carrying a small package. The agent signaled subtly for the cop to stay still. The figure moved carefully, looking around before passing the package to another person. The cop watched, realizing the significance of every movement. He could see how each action fit into a larger system, a network of activity that could easily go unnoticed. "Do you see how they operate?" the agent whispered. "Every move is calculated, every action purposeful. This is what I track, what I analyze. Understanding these connections is how we prevent escalation." The cop nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. He had encountered criminal operations before, but he had never witnessed such precision and coordination. It was like watching a complex machine, each part essential to the whole. He felt both impressed and challenged, realizing how much more there was to learn. They continued observing, and the agent explained subtleties that the cop had overlooked. "Notice the timing, the pauses, the glances. Every detail tells a story. Ignoring these details can lead to mistakes, even for seasoned officers." The cop leaned against a wall, absorbing the information. His mind raced as he connected patterns, realized the importance of timing, and recognized the power of patient observation. He felt a mixture of frustration and admiration, knowing that he had relied too heavily on instinct alone. This encounter was reshaping his understanding of law enforcement. Hours passed and the night deepened. The agent remained calm, methodical, and attentive. The cop mirrored his actions, focusing on observation rather than immediate action. He began to see the patterns, predict movements, and understand the motivations behind actions. It was as if a new layer of perception had opened, revealing details that were invisible before. Finally, the agent spoke, breaking the silence. "You've made progress. Most officers would have lost patience or acted prematurely. Your focus, your willingness to learn sets you apart. Observation is a skill that takes time to develop, but you're on the right path." The cop felt a sense of pride tempered by humility. He realized that his encounter with the agent was more than just learning about an operation. It was learning about himself, his limits, and the value of patience, strategy, and insight. "I understand now. Last night I didn't fully grasp the importance of what you were teaching. But tonight it's clear. There's so much more to law enforcement than I thought." The agent nodded, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "Knowledge, patience, and timing are tools as important as courage. The streets teach lessons, but learning from those who have experience with complex operations accelerates understanding. You're developing a perspective that few officers attain." The cop followed the agent as they moved away from the warehouse, careful to maintain their distance and avoid attention. His mind replayed every observation, every signal, every lesson from the night. He felt a growing respect for the agent, not just as an expert, but as a teacher and mentor in an unspoken way. As they paused at a quiet intersection, the cop turned to the agent. "I've seen enough to know that I don't fully understand your world. But I want to. I want to learn more." The agent's expression softened, acknowledging the cop's sincerity. Learning is a continuous process. Observation tonight was just one part. Next steps involve judgment, coordination, and decisive action when necessary. You're ready to begin seeing beyond the obvious." The cop nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and responsibility. He knew that the coming nights would test his ability to apply what he had learned, to combine instinct with strategy, and to navigate complex situations with caution and intelligence. This was not just about catching criminals, it was about understanding the bigger picture. They parted ways briefly, each returning to their respective vantage points. The cop's mind stayed alert, his senses sharpened. He realized that the city held challenges far beyond what he had imagined, and that learning from those with broader experience was invaluable. The night was long, but it was shaping him, preparing him for situations that required more than courage. It required skill, patience, and insight. By the time the cop returned to his patrol car, he carried with him a new awareness. He knew that he had met someone extraordinary, someone whose presence challenged his assumptions and whose guidance offered lessons he could apply immediately. The streets no longer seemed just a place of action. They were a place of observation, strategy, and subtle influence. As he drove through the quiet avenues, he replayed the agent's teachings, noticing details he had missed on the first pass. Every shadow, every movement, every sound carried meaning. He understood now that law enforcement was not just about force or authority. It was about understanding, anticipating, and acting wisely. And he knew that the agent would continue to guide him, directly or indirectly, shaping his perspective and skills in ways he had never imagined. The night was dense with shadows, the city lights flickering like distant stars against the low-hanging clouds. The cop parked his car a few streets away from the familiar warehouse district, his mind racing with the lessons he had absorbed over the past nights. Each encounter with the agent had challenged him, made him question his instincts, and yet built a sense of understanding he had never felt before. He stepped out of his car, stretching his legs as he walked toward the warehouse. The streets were quiet, but he knew silence often hid more than it revealed. Every alley, every doorway, every flicker of light could contain a clue. He moved cautiously, remembering the agent's guidance about patience, observation, and timing. From the shadows, the agent emerged again, moving as if he belonged to the night itself. His calm presence contrasted sharply with the tension the cop felt inside. "You're back," the cop said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I thought I had learned a lot already, but I can feel there's more." The agent gave a subtle nod. "Learning never stops. Observation tonight is only the first step. We will now focus on understanding judgment, coordination, and collaboration. Seeing patterns is one thing. Knowing how to act on them safely is another." The cop followed as they moved closer to the warehouse. The agent pointed out small details. The way people communicated silently, the subtle signs of recognition among those inside, and the rhythm of their movements. The cop noticed how the agent's eyes seemed to catch everything, as if nothing escaped his attention. "Notice the way they organize themselves," the agent whispered. "Every action has purpose. Every pause, every glance, every gesture is calculated. Understanding that allows us to make informed decisions instead of rushing blindly." The cop's mind worked quickly, connecting the dots. He saw how the movements inside the warehouse were linked, forming a complex web of coordination. He understood the importance of acting with precision, not haste. His usual reliance on instinct alone felt incomplete in comparison. Suddenly, a person emerged from the warehouse carrying a small bag. The agent raised a hand to signal the cop to stay still. They watched silently as the person handed the bag to another, who quickly moved away. The cop noticed how the transfer was smooth, controlled, and deliberate, yet so subtle that it could easily be missed. "See that?" the agent said quietly. "Every small detail matters. If you act too soon or too late, you risk losing control. Observation is not passive. It's an active process of understanding and predicting outcomes." The cop nodded, his eyes fixed on the scene. "I've learned more from watching tonight than from years of patrolling alone. Your approach, calm, precise, patient, it's a different kind of skill." The agent's expression was unreadable, yet there was a faint acknowledgement in his eyes. Skill without judgment is dangerous. Learning when to act, when to intervene, and when to wait is what separates effective law enforcement from reckless behavior. They continued to observe, and the cop began to apply what he had learned. He noticed subtle signs of coordination he had overlooked before, the way one person's glance triggered another's movement, the small shifts in posture that signaled instructions. He realized that law enforcement required more than courage. It required understanding systems and anticipating actions. After some time, the agent spoke again. "Observation is just one part of the process. The next step is coordination. Law enforcement is rarely a solo effort. You need to know how to work with others, how to communicate, and how to combine skills for effective action." The cop listened intently. He had often relied on his own abilities, believing that instinct and experience were enough. But now he saw the value of collaboration, of integrating knowledge, strategy, and timing with others' expertise. "I understand," he said. "It's not just about what I do, it's about how we work together." The agent nodded. "Exactly. And respect for others' skills is part of it. Local knowledge, federal oversight, strategic planning, they all complement each other. Conflict arises when ego interferes. Humility and focus create effectiveness." The cop reflected on his own pride, realizing that it had sometimes blinded him to learning from others. Tonight he felt a shift within himself, a willingness to accept guidance, a desire to observe and integrate rather than dominate. "I've been stubborn," he admitted quietly, "but I see now that collaboration makes the difference." The agent's eyes softened slightly, acknowledging the cop's honesty. "Recognition is the first step. Applying it consistently is the challenge. Tonight you'll get a chance to practice. Observation has shown you the patterns. Coordination will show you how to act without unnecessary risk." They moved to a vantage point where the cop could see the flow of activity inside the warehouse more clearly. The agent guided him in understanding roles, identifying key players, and anticipating potential issues. The cop noticed how the agent's presence influenced the situation subtly, without interference yet with control. He realized that mastery was not about domination, but about informed influence. Every operation has critical points, the agent explained. Knowing when and where to intervene is crucial. Too early and you disrupt. Too late and you lose opportunity. Balance comes from awareness, judgment, and experience. The cop absorbed this, his mind mapping out the sequence of actions, predicting outcomes, and preparing for controlled engagement. He felt a sense of empowerment, not from force but from understanding. The streets, once chaotic and unpredictable, began to reveal patterns and logic. Minutes stretched into hours as they continued. The agent shared insights on subtle communication, situational awareness, and the importance of patience. The cop practiced identifying signals, anticipating movements, and imagining controlled responses. Each lesson was a building block, shaping him into a more strategic and capable officer. As the night deepened, the agent turned to him. "You've done well. Observation and coordination are the foundation. The next challenge is action. You'll need to apply judgment, timing, and communication simultaneously. This is where theory meets practice." The cop felt a surge of determination. He understood that the lessons were not abstract. They were preparation for moments when decisions could have real consequences. "I'm ready," he said. "I want to see how to apply everything I've learned." The agent nodded, a faint approval in his eyes. "Good. Action must always follow understanding. Patience and preparation are meaningless without the courage to act wisely when necessary. You've learned the first part. Now you'll see how it comes together in practice." They watched as the activity inside the warehouse reached a subtle climax. The cop noticed the signals, the shifts, the cues that the agent had pointed out before. He felt the lessons crystallize, his understanding deepening with every observation. He realized that law enforcement was not about reacting. It was about thinking, anticipating, and responding with precision. Finally, the agent spoke, signaling that it was time to leave. "Tonight was about understanding. Application will come. You have made progress, but the real test is ahead. Observation and coordination are tools. Judicious action is the skill that completes them." The cop followed silently, reflecting on the night. He had seen how the agent operated, learned about patience, judgment, and collaboration, and felt a transformation within himself. The streets no longer seemed like random chaos. They were patterns waiting to be understood, challenges to be navigated with skill and care. As they parted ways near the edge of the district, the cop felt a deep respect for the agent. He realized that true expertise was not about showing dominance or authority. It was about knowledge, patience, and the ability to act at the right moment. The night had taught him humility, strategy, and the power of observation combined with thoughtful action. The cop returned to his car with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that his work on the streets would never be the same. He had learned that collaboration, timing, and judgment were as important as courage and instinct. And he carried with him the knowledge that the agent's guidance had reshaped not only his understanding of law enforcement, but his approach to facing danger, making decisions, and respecting the skills of others.